Hi, I'm Gloria Frim, and I chair the MFA in Writing program, and I'm so happy that this is my last Word World. No, I am really happy that I can sit back once again and be faculty, and the next time this happens, I will be among you, among my people, instead of up here. In any case, I want to tell you that tonight we're going to hear fabulous readings by 8 MFA thesis project students, and they are as follows: Zoe Young, Trey Bidinger, Ella Schoefer-Wulf, Nathan Freeman, Erin Carini, Soraya Domi Lozano, Daniel Keating, and DeShara Suggs-Joe. Our students, for those of you who have never been to Word World before, and maybe some of you for whom this is the first time you visited your children here and or visited your friends here, our students have created amazing worlds out of their imagination and out of hard work. And I can tell you that Thesis is a world between worlds, right? And they're almost finished. They have one more week. Our students have one more week. So welcome, class of 2017. Welcome, class of 2018. Welcome the few new students, newly admitted students. I saw a couple come in for the second time from our first Word World to our second. That must say something, that a new student is coming back for more. Maybe like our hors d'oeuvres or something, I don't know. But welcome home, alum. There are a couple of you in the audience. And so thank you all for coming tonight. I have special gratitude that I really have to give, and this is the first time I've ever done it by name, but I always want to thank my faculty, the best faculty a chair could ever want, and from my point of view, the best faculty a student could ever want. Juvenal Acosta, Faith Adiele, Anita Amarazvani, Hugh Bem Steinberg, Dodie Bellamy, Rebecca Bloyd, Donna de la Perriere, Tanya Foster, Alyssa Golden, Carolyn Goodwin, Kevin Killian, Joseph Leese, Denise Newman, Erica Olson, Amy Fawn, Judith Sarin, Shanti Sakiran, Matt Shears, Al Young, all stellar writer professors. Yes. And last but not least, a big, huge bucket of gratitude to Naomi Washer, who has helped manage every single detail of tonight, not to mention every detail of every detail, right? She is our tireless program manager, and she's organized all these millions of details that go into Word World. And I want to say, please remind yourself that after the reading is over, to join us for our reception at the Writers' Studio, 195 DeHaro. Someone will lead you there if you don't know where it is. For food and drink and merriment. Oops, I forgot the music. Naomi, remind us to put on some music. or negoci music, okay? Because you did better than we did. Okay, I always say a little something. I hope I'm not going to talk for too long, but truth is, I wish I were a stand-up comic. I really do. I can be very funny, as my friends know, and some of my students know. I would do anything for a laugh, which is what some of my students have written on course evaluations. But mirth, as Emily Dickinson said, is the male of anguish. So always understand what's behind the tears of the clown. I wish I could write gags that would have you not rolling in the aisles, but shaking your head, especially about a subject that's been on my mind, truth. It's been on my mind for a long time, in the way in which it's hit the media, and in the way in which it's been bandying it about in politics. What would Lenny Bruce, Richard Pryor, Joan Rivers, Chris Rock have to say about truth? What would they have to say about the current political and social climate and our country as the sick heart of contemporary reality? How do we as writers, not comedians, not entertainers, attend to the realities of the world's violence and injustice? How do we be true about what we say? It's a really big topic. I'm not going to go into it too deeply. You know, I have to say it's the subject of philosophy, basically. For millennia. Philosophy has a lot to say about truth, or the truth, or what's true, defining it as omniscience and subjectivity. We have Aristotelian, Islamic, and neoclassical thought say that truth is what corresponds in the mind to what is outside it. In other words, that a belief is true if and only it corresponds to a fact. Well, Emily Dickinson writes in poem 1455, opinion is a flitting thing, but truth outlasts the sun. If then we cannot own them both, possess the oldest one. Truth, says Foucault, is problematic when any attempt is made to see it as an objective quality. Foucault doesn't like the term truth itself, but he likes regimes of truth because he's done the historical homework, and historically he finds truth to be something that was itself a part of or embedded within a given power structure. Truth for Foucault is also something that shifts throughout history. Then we have Baudrillard, Jean Baudrillard, who considers truth to be largely simulated. That is, pretending to have something as opposed to dissimulation, pretending to not have something. The simulacrum is never that which conceals the truth. It is the truth which conceals that there is none. The simulacrum is true. Truth has been depicted in images. One of my favorites is a woman being saved in a French painting, 18th century French painting by Francois Lemoine. A woman being saved from falsehood, the naked figure of truth. She's held aloft by her father, time. He's whacking at falsehood with a kind of machete, a scythe. And envy is receding while protesting all this disruption. Historians and archaeologists and journalists dig up the truth as though it were buried treasure only to find that the currency is so changed that the treasure is worth nothing today, but its value is that it was buried, that it was not allowed to have its worth when it was buried, but now has a totally different worth. And truth is very big in the New York Times. Truth is big in the news. I felt that I would have to say something about truth, even in the most superficial way, when a few months ago the New York Times ran a full-page ad of axioms on truth and how important it is. We must not forget or silence the truth, we're told. The truth is hard, the New York Times said. There's a whole list of them. You might remember them. I passed them out to my Dickinson seminar folk, and they were quite arresting at the time. A little bit simplistic, but you know what they were clearly a reaction to Trump and the whole business of alternative truth. But the truth is not so obvious. The truth has no agenda. I don't believe that. But the truth requires taking a stand. We must not misrepresent the truth. I don't know what is true. Not in general, but I do know that truth must be represented. It can't be left to represent itself. The truth cannot be left to represent itself. So, once again, writers are representers of the truth. Class of 2017, once again, I invite you, your mission, should you accept it, I hope you do, I really do, is to make art that represents the truth. Thank you. Okay, Zoe Young is our first reader. Zoe Young's fiction investigates the subset of people for whom making art is a basic human need. Her work explores the intersections between art practice and mental illness, profession and obsession, and the often indistinguishable line between making art and living it. Let us welcome Zoe Young.
All right, I think we're ready for a reading. Gloria, thank you for that introduction. And thank you so much for your speech and your words on truth. So, also, that's what happens when you give burlesque dancers MFAs. I'd also like to thank my mentors, Rebecca Bloyd, Anita Armerazvani, Donna De La Perriere, Tanya Foster, and last but certainly not least, John Lasky, my Gran Faulkner. This book would not have happened without you. Thank you to the Finishing School Writers Group, my North Star, my spectacular cohort, and the best family and group of friends a person can ask for. We are all Starbarf. The scene I'm about to read is one of the only instances of nonfiction in my novel, and it fits very well with Gloria's remarks. Though set in Brownsville, Brooklyn, the following is based on events that took place just a stone's throw from this very auditorium. All right. The door of the shack was ultramarine. Rye knew it was ultramarine because he'd chosen that color over cobalt at Utrecht 2 days earlier. It was a piece of plywood hung between two tarps as part of a 3-walled shelter. The fourth wall was the side of a warehouse. The door had been painted with fingers, small fingers, he thought, and Rye imagined the hand to which those fingers belonged breaking the lock on his studio door. Rye was sure he knew the culprit personally. Now 4 years living in Brownsville, he was on a first-name basis with every junkie on the block. Brownsville was a shithole, and so was Rye's studio, aka his apartment. But it was supposed to be that way. Dirt cheap rent is necessary for some artists and some junkies, and Rye conceived of the situation as a sort of misery cooperative with some potentially important side effects. The artists have to live in shitholes to afford to make art. The junkies have to live in shitholes to afford to buy junk. The artists end up making art about their shithole homes, i.e., their neighbors, the junkies. But here's the twist. People who can afford to live outside the artist-junkie neighborhood buy the art and think about the junkies. The problem is, they don't tell you that one day, one or more of your junkie neighbors will break into your studio and steal 8 new tubes of oil paint that cost $31.50 plus tax. The cadmium red was an even $50, a gut punch. Rye could not replace that paint, not if he wanted to pay rent, which he did. But more than that, he wanted to make the painting he'd been planning, the painting that had been commissioned and would pay his rent long into the future. The break-in hadn't felt like getting mugged. Getting mugged makes sense. The street belongs to the mugger, and once you tread upon it, your wallet becomes their property. But coming home to find your house half torn apart is different. It doesn't sweep your legs out from under you. It takes the floor. Rye knocked on the blue door. Metal clinked on metal, and somebody said, "God damn it." Nothing happened. He knocked again. More noise. This time it sounded like someone walking on paper. Then one of the tarps parted, not the newly painted door, and a gaunt old man said, "Well, hello." Rye had no idea what to do. "Hi," he said. "I'm Henry," the old man said too eagerly. He put out his hand. Rye shook it. What else was he going to do? He noticed a smudge on Henry's knuckles that was either a bruise or an ancient point-and-stick tattoo. "I'm Rye." "Rikers!" came a gravelly woman's voice from inside the shack. "You know him?" the old man asked. "Yeah, lives up the block." "Then come in," Henry said. So Rye did. Henry held out the tarp for him to crouch under. Looking into the shack was like looking into a geode. Pieces of CDs stacked on crumpled newspaper inserts, leaning towers of soup cans overflowing with God knows what. Broken bits of shiny things, unrecognizable as anything but magpie mortar. The woman who had spoken sat cross-legged in the midst of the piles with her hands in the matted hair of a third man laying face down in her lap. Rye recognized her. She lifted a hand from the man's head and waved. Rye waved back. "Hi, Jules," he said. The smell of human musk was a marine layer under the sun-baked tarps. "What's going on, Rikers?" Were these people gaslighting him? The door was blue. They must know why he was there. "Not much," Rye said. He looked across the shack at a pile of milk crates serving as shelves, and there, next to a chipped glass pipe, was his impasto matte medium, the thick, colorless substance that turns less paint into more paint. "Hey," Rye said, pointing at the tube, "you mind if I take a look at that?" "Sure thing." Henry handed it to him like he was passing Rye a lighter. "What's wrong?" Jules asked. "Somebody broke into my place." Rye was utterly at sea. "Oh, that's too bad," Henry said. "What's the damage?" "They took some paint." Rye held up the tube. It had been opened, but he could feel it was still mostly full. "Oh, glad you could get it back," Henry said. Rye was so confused he couldn't speak. "What else they take?" Jules asked. He was staring at her with his mouth open. "Rikers, what else they take?" "Just the paint," he said. 7 more tubes." "That's it? If it was me, I'd have jacked the toilet paper first thing." Rye hadn't taken inventory of his toilet paper. It wasn't you?" "Not us," Henry said. Then the head in Jules' lap spoke. "Have him check the cart." "Yeah, look in the cart," Jules said. "It's outside. Might be some in there." Rye made to push open the door. "Use the tarp," Henry yelled. On the sidewalk was a wooden cart on casters with a dirty stuffed animal crushed under one of the wheels to keep it from rolling away. Rye dug past cans, bottles, an orange cone, dog leashes, until he found 3 paint tubes on the cart's sticky bottom. cadmium yellow, magenta, and burnt umber. The burnt umber had been punctured halfway down the tube, but he could just throw some duct tape on it if that hadn't been stolen too. The paints had all been opened, but like the impasto, they were mostly full. He rummaged through the cart until he was sure he'd seen everything. "Where's the rest?" he yelled back at the shack. "Just a minute," it was Henry. Rye went back under the tarp. It was really more of a fort now that he thought about it. His hands were sticky and black in places, but he now had 4 tubes cradled in his right arm. "This is all I found." The scene inside the shack was exactly the same, except the face-down man's shirt was now off. "I'm still out 4 tubes. Tell him to talk to Tony," the face-down man said. "Go talk to Tony," Jules said. Rye addressed the back of the face-down man's head, sure this was his thief. "Did you give them to Tony?" There was a pause, and the face-down man spoke again. "Tell him to talk to Tony." Jules just looked at Rye this time. He lifted the tarp. "Thanks for stopping by," Henry said. Then Rye heard the words, "Have a good day," escape his lips. They didn't have to tell him where Tony lived. Rye knew. Everyone within a 5-block radius knew. Tony was homeless, he had Tourette's, and he lived on the street corner across from Rye's building. Tony's nightly barking was a sonar unto itself. Instead of drawing from the expected profanity thesaurus, Tony yelled nothing but Marlon Brando. Streetcar named Desire, The Godfather, On the Waterfront. Tony knew the whole Brando catalog, and it all came out in spurts like he was yelling at a small dog. Senator Corleone, President Corleone, cat shit Corleone, every night. Rye could see Tony from his window, but there wasn't much to see. No tent, no cart, no sleeping bag, just an old man sitting on the sidewalk, screaming. Rye turned the corner, and naturally, Tony wasn't there. He walked down the street to his spot and inspected a big gulp full of something that definitely wasn't soda baking in full sun, half a newspaper, as in a newspaper literally ripped in half, and 3 tubes of oil paint lined up against the building in the thinning strip of shade. Viridian green, zinc white, and the most precious, most necessary to the painting upstairs, cadmium red. Rye had given up on the ultramarine, but to find the rest of his paint here just waiting was unreal. Then came a new dilemma, whether or not he could steal his paints back. Tony wasn't his thief. The man could hardly walk, let alone break into an apartment, and at this point, Rye was sure the culprit had been the face-down man from the blue-doored shack. That meant Tony would have received the paints as a gift or traded for them. But what could he possibly want with oils? Rye stood there paralyzed on Tony's sidewalk, staring at the word zinc on his unopened tube of zinc white. He could see all 3 tubes were untouched. Rye couldn't move. He couldn't make himself tank the paint, and he couldn't make himself leave. And then something even stranger happened. Tony came back. He was shoeless, as usual, limping on his right leg, muttering something. He had nothing in his hands, but he seemed to be returning from an errand. He walked right past Rye and plopped down between the paint and the half newspaper. Rye stared at the top of his head for a long time. They were both in hot sunlight, notable because if Tony were to shift 270 degrees, the distance of a few feet to the building's facing edge, he would have been in shade. Rye figured it was a show of loyalty to his spot. Tony took the tube of cadmium red from the sliver of shade and put it against the back of his neck. Of course, he was cooling the metal. The paint tubes were ice packs to him. After that, he seemed to notice Rye for the first time. "You hot?" Tony asked. Rye nodded. Tony handed him the zinc white. As he reached for it, Rye remembered he was holding 4 other tubes of paint and shifted them awkwardly to the crook of his arm. He took the white and held the tube against the back of his neck. It was nice. "You can keep that," Tony said. His normal speaking voice wasn't nearly as rough as his yelling voice. "I just need 2, one on the neck and one in the shade." "Where'd you get these?" Rye asked. Tony pointed back down the block in the direction of the blue-doored shack. "Hank brought 'em over." Rye assumed Hank was the face-down man. Then Tony put the cadmium red back down in the shade and picked up the viridian green and started rubbing the metal on his face. Just watching the word viridian move in circles across a surface, even Tony's cheek, rocketed Rye back into the painting he had been planning. Forms like dark trees would shoot upward and support tangled ribbons of hot secondary colors. He saw his charcoal sketches, his color tests, the massive canvas he'd stretched. The only thing on it now was his underpainting, more of a suggestion than a map, because this painting wanted to be thick. These forms wanted to grow and erode and grow again. "Tony, it's my paint," Rye said flatly. Tony hadn't heard him. He had the butt of the Viridian tube in his eye. God damn it. "Tony," Rye said. He looked up at him this time. "They're my paints." Tony looked confused. "What paints?" Rye held out the zinc white. "These." "Oh no, they're Hank's." Tony gave Rye a knowing smile, like he was helping him with a genuine misunderstanding. "Hank took them from me," Rye said. Oh. Now Tony understood. He looked down at the sidewalk and put the Viridian against his lips. Rye hated himself. Rye returned to his studio with all 7 tubes of paint, too guilty to use them. He improvised a lock on his door with an old padlock and walked to the liquor store, where he spent 2 of the $5 he had for dinner on a battery-operated handheld fan. He gave it to Tony, who only said, "Thanks, brother," and turned it on immediately. That night, the usual Brando soliloquies poured forth from Tony's corner. Rye painted until sunrise with all 7 colors, windows open because of the turpentine. He'd reordered the hues in his head so as not to need the ultramarine blue, and the painting grew steadily, methodically, and for the first time, Rye felt like he was painting with Tony. Dark, angular forms rose from a red soup as Johnny was defeated by the road in the Wild One. Rye mixed a bright green and added a thick glob of the impasto mat as Tony made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Rye took a stab at the first ribbon form. It felt like flying. They were having a conversation, he and Tony, half Brando, half paint. At dawn, Tony shifted to the howled lines of a therapist that Rye would later recognize as belonging to a movie called Don Juan DeMarco. Rye collapsed onto his mattress. The ribbons on the canvas were becoming the matted tangle of color he'd hoped for, and this was only the beginning. When Rye awoke, he went to visit Tony. They were friends now. He found him in his spot, the big gulp empty, and the little fan in pieces by his foot. "What happened to your fan?" Rye asked, unsure whether or not Tony recognized him. "Must have broke it last night," Tony said. "Sometimes I break things in the night." Thank you. Thank you. Oh, man. I can't. All right. Thank you very much. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce my friend, Trey Bidinger. It takes a deft and discerning hand to build a world from the ground up, but only the most adept can imbue an imagined universe with such starkly current pathos. Please welcome the only man I know who can maintain a delicate touch when writing about giants, Trey Bidinger.
How's everybody doing? All right, thank you all for being here. I want to thank a few people first. First of all, my folks, my mother is here somewhere, for encouraging me throughout this ridiculously impractical and abnormal career path. Second, the faculty here at CCA. You all have a tremendous impact, whether you see it now or 10 years down the line. I have to give a special shout out to Opal Adisa and Eric Olson, both of whom worked with me for multiple semesters and have been paramount in the development of my work. And finally, to all those in my cohort and all of my weird San Francisco people out there, each of you in your own way have made the last 2 years bizarre, intense, and profoundly eye-opening. In the cheeky words of Bilbo Baggins, I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Now, I'm going to read a bit from a chapter of my thesis. The chapter is called She Comes in Colors. What you need to know is that my protagonist, Ek, who was 13 at the time, has decided to leave the mountain cavern city he calls home after finding himself responsible for the accidental death of another child. When the caverns were still, and the only sound came in the drip, drip, drip of meltwater, Ek packed a bag and slipped out of Dovodem. He soon found himself following familiar landmarks. All day he trudged along the timberline on the western face of the mountain, confident that he knew this ravine, that cliff face. But as the hours left and night's curtain once again threatened in the east, Ek struggled to find a place to escape the approaching darkness. From his pocket, he pulled a hollow crystal with a wood plug. He shook it. Inside, an umber liquid made from bat blood, pine oil, and ash had almost completely coagulated. Ek had an hour, at most. He scrambled up a ridge butting the confluence of the two glaciers, Garta and Peko. Through the snowfall he looked, seeking any gap in the ice, any black in the white. He scoured his memory for Father's lessons, but he remembered little. He didn't listen. Father was right. Fool. But there, below him, where the glaciers met, a split in the ice, and a deep black within, a cave. A ribbon of red light flashed from inside, then vanished. Ek froze. The light pulsed again, and a warmth fired up his legs. He stepped back, looked at his trousers, thought he'd wet himself, but no. Heat shot through his muscles with each pulse of the light, all his tendons flexing. This, Father had never mentioned anything quite like this. He closed his eyes, but still Ek felt when the light shone. And then, in the silence that windless snowfall brings, Ek heard a noise, like the brush of snow across slate, whispering a single word that he could not understand, delicate at his ear, Mizju. A rush of warmth like hot sap spread from his forehead over the crown and down his spine. The heat slid round his buttocks, hugged his inner thighs, and coiled into his groin. Ek's back bowed, hips drew forwards with the building heat. His breath seized. But in an instant, the heat fell away, was taken away. A new impulse struck Ek, a reckless need pulsing. Ek marched down to the ice and stopped at the cave's mouth. It breathed warm air. Ek shifted his weight back and forth, this pressure knotting between his legs. When the red tendril flared from the blackness, curling at him an invitation, Ek did not hesitate. Into the cave. Ek shuffled down the sloping darkness, buoyed by the damp, warm air hanging in the cave. He mumbled the sound, Mizju. A name, he decided. Someone had called him by a name he hadn't known he possessed. Hello? He whispered. His foot splashed and dipped up to the ankle. Ek jumped back and raced through a moment of panic. The water had passed through his boot, had soiled the wool of his sock. Yet the water in his boot was warm. Ek kneeled, patted at the rock ahead of him, then felt his fingertips graze water. He dipped his hand in, yes, a gentle heat. Weird. Ek inhaled, seeking the rotten scent of a hot spring, but he could smell only salt. He rubbed his fingers together, felt a tiny grit. How could this? Within the water, something rough and fleshy gripped his thumb. Tingling shot up his forearm. Ek yipped, yanked his hand back. Water gurgled as he pulled whatever held him from the surface. Ek scrabbled back, but the grip tightened. And with it, the warmth returned, racing up his arm. Red light bloomed from an appendage wrapped round his thumb. The glow pulsed down a thin, boneless limb that trailed into the water. Red shimmered onto the close cave walls, illuminating the tendril's path through a shallow channel that arced around a bend in the passage. Heat undulated through Ek's body. The flesh flexed again, then a dozen seconds later again. It had the rhythm of a very slow heartbeat. It attached to something. It had to. Missed you, Ek whispered. He pulled off his boots and socks, set them in his bag, and stepped into the channel. Ek waded through the water, and the limb wrapped itself round his arm, about his waist, and down one leg. The tang of salt water thickened to a musk, warmer and warmer. Ek undid his furs, bore his chest to the heat. The channel opened into a flooded cavern. Water lapped, echoing against a domed and glistening ceiling. Carmine light diffused brightly into a mist, obscuring the far side of the cavern. From that direction, the single cord of red traveled through the deeper waters in its path to Ek's leg. When Ek saw that the pool went deep, he made to stop and consider. But when he planted his feet, the tendril kept pulling. Ek lowered into a crouch, yet the sand beneath his feet gave way to momentum. He slid, the water at his knees, then thighs, then, "Hey!" he croaked and went under. Arms flailing, eyes stinging, Ek scrabbled for a hold. His fingers clutched at sand, glimpses of vegetation, a shade of green he'd never seen before, clumps of blue and yellow, creamy white baubles and gelatinous globs bobbing through the water, all of it basked in red. The taste of salt slipped into his mouth. Ek gripped the cord, tried to pull it loose, to snap it, to twist it, but it would not budge. Pressure built in his chest. He pulled his mouth down to his arm, bit into the thing, but his teeth would not tear it. Bubbles spurt from his nose. His eyes bulged. His heartbeat thumped in his head. He kicked for the surface, but the cord was taut. Ek's mouth opened to the salt water. It flooded his mouth, wet his sinus. Visions swayed, the red growing bright, and suddenly he surfaced. He coughed and gasped, and the tendril pulled him through the shallows and onto sand. The creature unraveled itself, slid away. Ek got to his knees and found a line trailing through the sand, leading up the shore. It slithered over a rise, then dipped into a pool where the water gurgled and rolled with fleshy things. Thousands of the crimson tendrils swayed to and fro. Some were short and engorged, some thin and long, but all of their ends met near the back of the pool, fusing one by one by one into a massive mound of glowing orange flesh that sat half in, half out of the water. The thing bobbed side to side, steady and constant. It stank worse than anything Ek had ever smelled, salt and rot. He could taste it, slimy and insistent, wandering through the back of his mouth. But the impulse to gag shifted to a pleasant tingle. Now, when he inhaled, the scent was spicy and sweet, like the cinnamon sap candy Laren always bothered Mother to make. And beneath all this, the urge climbed back into Ek's groin. His tongue pressed at his teeth. The word, his word, came again, not spoken but heard between his ears. Missed you. It wanted, it pleaded, missed you. It swayed in the pool and waited. Ek entered the water. The creature's many hands unfurled along the bottom. Ek stepped atop them. They coiled round his thighs, pressed his lower back, edging his hips, then curling up round his shoulders to brush at his throat. The buzzing, spastic warmth built. The tentacles lifted Ek up, hung him face down over the creature. Green and yellow striations coated its skin like veins. Fissures carved through the exposed flesh, leaving it split like cracked earth. The skin here did not flex and bob. The skin here had dried out. I'm sorry, Ek said. He reached down, meaning to soothe it. When his fingertip touched that flesh, Ek's vision dropped away, shifting to a fan of color, a panacea of blues to yellows to greens and purples and reds and browns, and all of it melding together. He could not turn his head in other directions, could not feel his limbs or his heartbeat, could feel only the presence of another. Ek collapsed into her urge, let her pull his history loose. He dared to speak, to see how she met him. He asked her to invade. Spirals of white spun out of the color, and with them a voice shrieking loud and terrible, "Mischa!" Ek tried to retreat, Suddenly, he did not want this word. Whatever it meant, Ek did not deserve it. He tried to scream, but she would not allow it. She began to push him away, her colors fraying and snapping with jolts of black. Her stare turned hard and closed, and Ek spilled out with regret. Please, no, I'm sorry. Mezja! He felt his hand then clenching tight round something. And she panicked. Her blues and purples rushed away, swept off to tiny pinpricks of light in a sky of black. And the voice, echoing now and fading to a whisper, then gone. Prickling heat in his palm, salt and rot in his nose. All black, and she'd left him. Thank you. My pleasure to introduce Ella Schoefer-Wulf. Ella Schoefer-Wulf is a Bay Area-based German-American writer, artist, and curator. Her work is a primarily linguistic inquiry focusing on the intersections between language and the body, and how these play out in relationship with the visual arts, performance, and digital media. Along with her personal art practice, she is a co-founder of Daughter's Tongue Writing Coalition, an artist at the Navajo Mountain Boarding School Project, and co-curates the Orange Box and the Room Galleries. Welcome, Ella.
Hello. I have a lot of people to thank, but because I'm a big fan of peer-to-peer learning, I'm going to focus my gratitude on the people I learn from that are in my community of cohort. So everyone in my classes, and then of course specifically my collaborators, DeShara and Grace, Magdalena and Ryan. I'm so grateful that you teach me every day. And I'm reading things I'm writing about. When I first got to CCA, I came with a very different emotional and physical narrative than what I'm leaving with. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this with some excerpts from my thesis. And I'm going to start with a few love poems that started with this. I know many things I cannot say. I love you less than tomorrow. The body is no longer my own, but one of longing. Longing to materialize in any shape you desire. What do you desire? Your lack of response immobilizes and I become waiting. I use language to push the sentence across the page, to press time forward. But the sign keeps returning to its own emptiness, a structure filled with a system of knowing my body had become so I could know you. A house, an entire civilization. I go to the body. I count every hair. I shave myself and watch it grow back. My body tells me nothing. No ideas, but in things, so I put memory in places. They move into the shapes of words, and the words insist upon themselves. Here's a memory. I have none. When you left me with our words framed and hung, and took our language, I became a house full of photographs. All the words my mouth could not become because grief soaks the tongue to the end of becoming. I'll be as straightforward as possible. I did not hate language before I met you. Pain runs its hands along words, and these notes are on continuing, but they do not move. And I put memory into places. How pathetic to mourn, howling flesh toward sentimentality. Too rigid for this kind of pain, unlike trees when the storm hits, the body snaps, scattered along. I was once an artist, and now I am a fraudulent form. And because I have not considered myself, I don't know who I am, And because I have not been writing regularly, because I have thoughts but no process, my language crumbles and is overgrown. And my heart collects skulls, becomes skulls, and collects skulls, and they disintegrate more eventually than flesh. Flowers flower, and the sky presses down on the earth. When I say that there are those who survive and there are those who don't, I mean that while some speak of light, others speak of mercy. A new universe is as likely as an old one. My body is heavy, but less than tomorrow, and I know many things I cannot say. And here are my notes on writing, that this is not poetry to me. How I take corners and write things out, getting older and only older, measure the number by value only in order to measure a value, to be desperate, to be a body that considers itself disintegrating, to constantly locate points of pain and possible infection, to remember watching bugs run down your eyelids and through your arms, to hear things like forever and remember being very young when you hear them, to be young in a body that sags and is not desirable, to be impossible to be desired, to be impossible, to measure the body by value in order to measure its periphery, to hand over the measurements when you can't locate them. This is not poetry to me. To write things out like disassociation and grief and total emptiness, to fill these words with meaning through the linguistic process of signification, to point and point again to letters, to attempt to signify a lack, is not poetry to me. And finger harder pouring inside like inside, and inside like inside, and inside like inside like the word itself becomes itself, and don't tell me the word isn't also an image, or that my body doesn't body through language, to constantly locate points of infection, even in the process of repetition that makes you glaze over, where the process of signification moves from the word to how one follows the next, and now you're skimming over inside. To measure the value through corners like it can fit in an elbow, to sag over signs, and to never write again. And here are my afterthoughts. That the weight of the world is what we hang on it. Reconsider the word touch, the body and language at their limits. Consider touch at its limits. Make everything permeable. Make yourself permeable. If you don't change, you will die. And if you change, you will die anyway. Thank you. Okay, next up is Nathan Freeman. Nathan is lightning, crumbled laughs of insanity, masked rage, with the presence of a screaming, yet calm and articulate artist. Nathan sculpts and paints language into a mastered whirlwind of violence and beauty. He is intelligent and always willing to help others and show kindness. With great honor, my honor, Nathan Freeman.
Thank you. I feel like I should say I didn't write that. I didn't gloat about how great of a classmate I am. I hope I was great class, but Brandon wrote that, which he's not here, but thank you, Brandon, wherever you are, for writing that. As with my colleagues, I have tons of people to thank. I forgot to write names at the top of my paper, so thank you everybody who's in here equally. It's been a lot of fun. This has been a great experience, and honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. So this is going to be from my thesis, and all you really need, it's the intro. All you really need to know is that it is strange. Here we go. And it's the main character is Newbie, so when you hear me say Newbie, that's what I'm talking about. Newbie doesn't hit the rails like a punk ass anymore. It's a bright and stormy night. Big lightning gnarls crooked over the city, and in the flash he sees smiles. darkly painted smiles, smiles slashed in ink crescents, ear to ear, across jaws, across white mask jaws. From the flank, front, and back, breath huffs, puffs, and steams hot through each runner's drawn mouth. Arms and legs thrash, rubber soles smash and skid along storm-glazed roof rocks and loose shingles. Between groans and grunts, laughter. They hurtle and sprint along the reeling roofways in a mad skeletal army, clad up in torn jeans, old t-shirts, ripped jackets, soggy sneakers, and pale masks, grinning black. Newbie runs the middle of the line on the tippy tops of this mangled city. The walls are buckled brick and broken glass. The concrete is fractured and warped. The wood is long splinters. Out in the distance, still skyscrapers lean and arch. Between the charcoal dark of their craggy ridges, it's color. It's all color. The facades of walls, houses, buildings, grocer, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, all painted and glowing bioluminescent, glowing like a zillion multichromatic fireflies all zapping at once, or an enormous aquatic creature from an ocean trench signaling spastic neon. The brightest colors hum with energy. Ice whites, hot pinks, electric blues, limey greens, canary yellows, and the amalgamation of every mural buzzes low and sonorous. Color tides transmorgify into shapes, to figures cartoony and elongated, to battle boats and rocket cars, to lumbering tyrannosaurs and sprightly ballerinas, to a legible scrawl. And still other walls seem broadly splattered with crayon cannon blast, or boiled till the ooze burbled up and seeped over the cusp. Colors zip past, and Newbie's temples pulse, his blood beating his ears in a drum solo. His chest scorches with lit napalm, and its squealing heat. It's singeing his aorta to little black sticks, but the combustion blasts his body past collapse, and the smile lashes him onward. His eyes are coal fires, and smoke billows steady from each nostril. His guts churn in a mess of belts and gears, and the smile lashes him onward. The sap that lines it bleeds in with the rain, and each time he tongues a trickle, a strawberry-flavored jolt fuels him like a machine. Up ahead, Billy's laughing his ass off, and the rasp of his mirth rings crisp over the wind gusts and panting. The wrecked heights are a dizzy trail, both familiar and mysterious. The twists and turns demand grace and finesse. The rain slicks the ground and makes the run that much more dangerous, but it's nothing compared to the torrents that came before. It was the storms that made these rails, this breakneck web of tracks and wind that weave through the roofways. It was the storms that made the city. Months ago, these ruins had swayed in big tsunamis, then tumbled like dominoes, each gray husk curling over the next. Streets were unwound, loopy as ribbon in the wind. Floodwaters lifted cars and trucks like dead bugs in a stream. Cyclones ripped doors and windows clean, wafted out the household junk therein. Toasters, cabinets, food, television sets, phones, gadgets, silverware, band posters, ottomans, art, if you can call it that, and flung it free into the whirling streets. The storms have ripped, flipped, and rerouted the city mad, and so the newbie runs it madly. Through torn eye holes, he marks the rail before him, like a surfer on the inner tube of a crashing stone wave, or an Indian trail with alloy fragment foliage. He marks the feet of the runner in front, and he marks the graffitied expanse. The broken, blighted world is swathed in paint, stroked, splattered, globbed, and plopped, drizzling like yolk, voltaic and luminous. And in this colored chaos, the name Billy reads boldly clear and dark, for the black paint never glows, with his warnings and ravings that swish past like highway billboards. Abandon hope, all ye who enter my radiant dominion, and also wear sunglasses at night. Sincerely, Billy. Judge not and shut the hell up, lest ye be skinned alive and sautéed in chocolate syrup. Your pal, Billy. Thanks for visiting Scenic Apocalyptia. Now buzz off, or else, love, Billy. And of course, the city provides, written over and over. The city provides, the city provides, the city provides, as if it weren't enough that Billy spouted it in an endless mantra. Newbie has painted many murals here, but he can't account for the sheer magnitude of color, nor how it inexorably assembles itself into shape and sign. Before Altos fell from the rails, he liked to believe that the paint wasn't impossible, that they had awakened some strange magic. He believed that the storms had released a slumbering and ancient mysticism, something humanity forgot when they floundered into the era of logic and secularism, something that could be read like tea leaves or runes or piles of bird bones, something that could be comprehended and even possibly wielded. Newbie's still pretty sure it's the drugs. He hits an alley gap, bounding it smooth as he strides through the space between the ledges. He sees the paint cascading down the ashlar to the abyss of the street, stories down, miles down, leagues down, so far down that holes look like dead pixels. His arms are numb now, but that's okay. In his sap numbness, he can't feel the cuts from stray wire, piping, and rebar, innards of the fissured buildings they traverse. He can't feel the sting of the rain, the weight of his backpack, and the wooden baseball bat slung between the straps like a baldric. On the rails, the drive to keep pace is absolute and consuming. Every thought and every motion relies unequivocally on the run, on placing one foot in front of the other. He can't smell the Black Smile's fumes anymore, but they stream cold like menthol in the back of his throat. No, Newbie doesn't hit the rails like a punk ass anymore, and this is because he's learned to love them. Newbie runs and he marks the long lengths of wall that curve in colored sluices. He runs on tall and silent stone through the great field of dead towers that have blossomed in hued reaches. And you know what? Fuck it. Maybe magic does exist. They run. They run and they follow the rail high above fluorescent city streets, every jettered scrap, slab, and metal aglow from so much paint, so much sap in their blood and in their smiles. They run and they follow the rail down kaleidoscopic corridors of brick arches and split concrete, down stone skin walls tattooed with bright paint, polish, garnish, tarnish, and paint. They run and they leap along graffiti towers, once vertical, now crested, waxing, waning. Thunder is a glee scream, and rain is happy tears. High above they run and they follow the rail through looted apartment windows and flights over alleys. They run and they follow the rail over washed-up semis and crooked trailers, bloated orange with rust. The city is a dark rainbow. The city is glitzing with moonlight winks. For the masked runners, sound is rolling heartquake. Touch is electric sinew, sight is neon flourish, taste and smell are strawberry acid, and they hunt. Thank you. I will introduce Erin now. Erin Carini is known for her flash-like humor and wit. She has an extreme passion for the arts, community building, and helping others. She has loved her time here in this program. Please welcome Erin Carini.
All right. Yes, me. There's a lot of crap up here. Do you want to see some sweet pageant wave? I practice. Oh, yeah. It's great. So I'm going to do things a little differently and talk about me, which is also great. So first thing is I sit a lot. I love sitting. Most of my day is spent sitting or eating or both. I wish I was sitting right now. But the only place that I can't stand sitting is the doctor's office. I mean, what are those seats made of? They are the most uncomfortable chairs in the universe. I mean, I can sit for a really long time, but I cannot sit in them. When I have to get up from sitting in them, I think, thank God I'm in a hospital because I just hurt my neck and my back and, sorry, I had to crack from the chair, you know, and my hips. It's terrible. And now I have the flu, and that guy's cold, and a Charlie horse. And every time I try to get up from those itchy chairs, I feel like I just ran a marathon. But all I did was sit for an hour. Another thing I don't like is, well, that's pretty big now, is anti-motivational posters. Like, life is the soup and I'm the fork. That does not make sense to me. That's not as discouraging as it could be. Yes, my problem is that they are not sad enough. You don't need a fork or a spoon to eat soup. I have eaten that stuff right out of the can. And I think that is a way sadder image. Forks imply income and at least some motivation. Two things I wish I had. I also have a lot of stuff going on in my head. Lots of negative chatters. Mostly my brain is full of internet trolls. So I am so mean to myself and others. Sorry, others. Here, I'll give you an example, and you can all participate. This was me earlier, in the mirror. You didn't practice enough. You're so sweaty. Is that normal? I think excessive sweating means you have cancer. They're all gonna laugh at you. That's a book joke, by the way. Book joke. Why are you like this? Come on. You guys think of something. It'll be fun. Nobody? Okay, fine. It's okay. I have plenty. It's all right. And it doesn't stop until I say something like, are you guys all Dementors? Because you suck so much. Another book joke. Yes, you're welcome. This is a writing thing, so it's fine. And yeah, I'm a little nuts. But I hate it when other people call me crazy. It's like, that's our word. Come on, guys. Well, that was fun. I hope you all had a good laugh, because this is not going to be funny. I'm going to read an excerpt from my story called Knuckles, available in sandwich form upon request. Okay, no, seriously. Laughing time is over now. No, stop laughing. All right. And even though I just messed up everything over here. But no one knows that but me, except I told you. Ooh, electric. From the sweat. Actually, it's not. Art is a lie. Knuckles. Plural noun. Knuckles, a round protuberance formed by the bones in a joint. Knuckles and Sonic the Hedgehog. He's a red anchilla, a specific breed of hedgehog, different from Sonic, with spikes hiding under comically large gloves. Fox Kids had Saturday morning cartoon lineup with Sonic, a show about magicians I can't remember, and my favorite 1994 classic, Spider-Man the Animated Series. My brother and I watched it religiously, one of the very few things we actually did together. I remember him on the opposite end of the couch, sullenly holding the arm I'd pinched and twisted too hard, me eating the last of the Frosted Flakes. He had to learn, like I did, that you couldn't get everything you wanted just because you had the love of both our parents. Especially the last of the Frosted Flakes. The smugness of my adolescent victory lasted as long as one takes to run across a crowded living room, but it still felt good. Knuckles. They protrude from a black steering wheel. I hold it so tightly that they shift from red to white. I can't reach the pedals, even though I have long legs for my age. My brother is crying in the back seat. I try to hold my tears in, try to keep breathing. I have to keep moving forward. My dad's eyes are closed, but I know he's not sleeping from the way his hands keep migrating toward my lap in the passenger seat. How old are you? He asks in a slur. I try to ignore him and the screaming and the pounding in my chest and the vice around my heart. I don't want to die. I tap the pedal by stretching out my foot and big toe as long as possible. I don't want to die. I see our house in the distance, and then can I loosen my grip. Knuckles. My almost boyfriend kisses them. When I wake up the next day, a tiny drop of me hides in the corner of his mouth. He pulls my arm as I try to get up. I am lost in a fog, not the monotonous, tortured past fog that I'm used to, but a pink cloud, coconut and warm ginger, the scent that best describes you. I'm not sure why, but that's how you make me feel. Safe, warm, coconutty. I first noticed the comparison while hunting for hand soap in the tiny grocery store by my old apartment. The day after our first date, I stumbled upon the scent, and now it's the only soup. Yes, soup. Delicious soup. It is the only soap I will ever buy. When you're not around, it guides me through the darkness, comforts me in a way that only touched the edges of explanation. Before you, my heart was pounded, smashed over and over again, and then poured into someone else's mold, left out in the sun to rot, occasionally picked at by vultures with fleeting interests. Nothing ever really reached me, a vague, unpleasurable haze. I'd be pried open with crowbars, the claws leaving bruises on my inner thighs, their jaws gnashing like hungry dogs. When they'd try to rip me apart, they'd want me to tell them. They'd want me to say it, to scream it. They say it feels better when I tell them, but my mouth is wired shut. But for you, the words slip from my tongue, unable to be contained. I meant what I said. He's still playing with my fingers. Which time? I asked. In a sleepy haze, he thought I was going to leave him. He pulls me back under the unfamiliar sheets, drowning in foreign territory, and then he repeats those 3 little words that I can never really trust and adds, "Please don't go." I search his eyes, still unable to see the truth. I feel the blood pulsing between my fingers. What's one more time getting hurt? I am Sisyphus, being punished for past deceitfulness. But instead of just pushing that boulder, I'm going to punch it over and over. I smile and reassure him that after I go to the bathroom, I will be right back. My almost boyfriend runs his tongue across my knuckles, and the pain stops for a moment. I have some raps that'll fit you. How would you like to learn how to box? Okay, and that's it. No more jokes either. All right. Yes. So it is my great pleasure to present, thank you, to present Soraya Jamina Lozano, who is a phenomenal nonfiction writer, just, from what I know, and is the author of the self-published chat books Bullets and Butterflies, Chicanas and Chakras, and she received her bachelor's degree in English from Mills College and is currently in the MFA in Writing program here at the California College of the Arts. Woo! Her poetry has been published in a lot of places. She's been Latino literature and anthologized in Canos an anthology of Aztec writing, and she is a Vona alum and a Pisces and writes to heal and empower herself and is just a wonderful person who's not going to be mad that I mispronounced a lot of those words. Woo!
Oh my gosh. I'm so blessed to be here. It's been a beautiful 2 years, and I really want to thank Denise Newman for my mentorship, and Joseph and Opal. It's been amazing, and just everybody in my cohort. You guys really changed me, and I'm a different person from 2 years ago. It's just been really cool. I'm going to read the poems from my thesis. They kind of tell a story. They speak to each other, but they're also, at the same time, I'm still writing it, so I don't think it's totally done yet. The first piece is called Kelp, so I think I'll just read them, say the title, and just go with the flow with it. So, Kelp. Don't hurry, space muscle, love-bound light beam, tentacles tangling. Out of all people do we come together, skinny, linking arms across the grass, hurricane wonder, pale blue sky, wandering warrior, lucid carriage, single, pins and needles, a desire. A boy recycles cans. By dusk, in my association, light flashes. My mother will be gone 4 nights out of the week. Flip phone from a corner store, as shame slides, lineage weakened, garlic bulbs, plucked earth, cans crushing, vanished, stacked and stacked. He's a collector that divvies, patchwork in the darkest corners. This is called Glitter and Magic. I was broke, couldn't ride the train, had him waiting like Van Gogh for paint to dry. I was broken, came out to my dad with a new name edged, let go like crazy legs, like a wet leaf stuck to shoes. I don't write for you. I write for glitter and magic, and my last name is what's left. This is called Earth and Face, and it's kind of about microaggressions. You're so much darker than the last time I saw you. It was winter the last time you saw me. She was a therapeutic herbalist who makes $75 oils for hands, feet, neck, and face, pushing her words like maps. Pin me. It looks like you just got back from Mexico. She thinks she can say that, or she had a Mexican nanny, or recovering from Drake, all the beer, gardens, all the sweets, foreigner. Take this, pressing finger pads into pores, my color, all the scars. Looking at her porcelain, silver glitter purses for tiny shoulders, crystalline, kaleidoscope skin, moon tattoo, windowsill. Brown, 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 developed, brown, brown, glowing. Sad brown girl cruising down the street in the back of a pickup truck, teased hair. Sad brown girl reaching over mountains of men, jellyfish sandals. The way we were light and the way we were shadow. And you said we only had 2 options, and both seemed impossible. And then I took a bite and linked my eyes. And if we could, let's go back to when we first tried. I will shake pain and comfort fragments and dance a shameless dance and dance like no one is looking and ink triangles on wrists and lose in boxing rings. If we could remember the light of language, make me forget why. This is called Lessons in Curating Impulse. He wants to write a play about Latino and white dynamics. I am brainstorming scenes where we gesticulate making out, but I can't find one. My throwback Thursday photos are of yoga pants or somebody else's succulents. I used to take walks at dusk in the summer and clip succulents from neighbors' yards, and months later I saw a sign, "Please don't take clippings." I am not sure if that would be in the play about Latino and white dynamics. I do not remember his smell anymore. No, I so do remember. It was a knockoff cologne and deodorant that drove me batshit crazy. The entire week, I refused to wash my clothes. I was obsessed with the stages of his smell fading away on my shirt, a shirt that costs more than a week's worth of almond milk lattes, even though I am not lactose. Drinking from his smell, what would that look like in a scene? We could never write for the stage. We are playing Trotsky and Frida. White honey mountain, buttocks to grab and pounce. We are all substance applied to the body, the body. Frida Kahlo was not just about her lovers. I never found her blue house in Coyoacan. I'm prone to getting lost when looking for something important. Thanks. I gotta read a few more. Thanks. This one's called Silence. I put my hand on the shruti box. He put his hand on mine. No, this way. He insists I'm not pushing hard enough. The shruti box is not a sound. The shruti box is not a note, but the sound of 2 fearful lovers going up the ladder into a starry sky. He does not tell me ever. He has never told me ever. The heart is hard. Olna. Olna, Olna, I am forgetting what I said goodbye to. Make me me again. Stay on the ride, even if you're upside down. Reach for me. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm so very happy to introduce Daniel Keating. He was the very first person that I met at CCA, and we took 1111 together my very first semester. So Dan Keating's interests include 19th century Russian literature, transgressive underground comics, classical Gothic literature, Golden Age science fiction, and contemporary postmodern studies. His fiction has appeared in Petrichor Machine, The Hungry Chimera, and strange fictions. He's never flown in an airplane and will probably never try. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Keating.
So first off, an apology. I'm fighting down a bit of a cold at the moment, so if I occasionally sound like there's a toad crawling up my throat, that's why. There are a lot of folks that I'd love to thank. Like, I could actually just take up the whole time doing that, and we could skip this nonsense, but really briefly, all my mentors, all friends and family, and especially my wife, Becky, who puts up with every single bit of nonsense that I bring out there, so... All right, so let's do this. I have a story to read for you from my collection of short fiction. It's called Cuddle Me Closer, Tiny Milton. And for that, I have asked that the co-star of the piece actually appear in the slideshow, so let's see if he's in here. There he is. So here we go. My daughter wants to buy the cuttlefish. Problem is, the one she's picked is big as a house, 50 feet long, its eyes the size of beach balls. Most folks don't know they get that big, but the guy at the store, Rick on his name tag, a little acne showing just under his black bangs, he's got to be around 40, is telling me it's not that uncommon, not if you feed them the right diet. Love and care and attention, Rick says, that's the key. If you've never tried to tell a 5-year-old she can't have something, it's sort of like trying to sweep up a hurricane with a broom. I mean, the thing is right there, so it's not like we don't have access to it. And sure, she might not be John Maynard Keynes or Milton Friedman yet, but she understands capitalism insofar as she understands that Daddy has some of the green paper. And if Daddy gives some of the green paper to someone she wants something from, she gets it. I think that's why capitalism won in the end, because kids can understand it so easily. Damn capitalism. Maybe when we get home, I'll see on the internet if there's a children's book version of the Communist Manifesto. It doesn't help that the cuttlefish is technically a baby. It is large enough to have its own zip code, and yet Rick insists that it's only 2 weeks old. He's been there with it since it was born. It's all in what you feed it, all in what it's handed to sustain its existence by people who want to profit off it. Okay, so that last part is more me than Rick. Rick's actually a little sullen, looking down at the ground when he's not looking proudly at the monstrosity in the gigantic tank in front of us. They had to wean it off its mother immediately to start feeding it right, and to get it this big, Rick says, scratching at a scuff on his left shoe and aged Chuck Taylor with the other. Instantly, my daughter's eyes fill with tears. It didn't get to have its mama, she says, like me. And I want to say, low blow, kid. It's not my fault your mother ran off with some guy with a bigger investment portfolio than mine. I mean, in the back of my mind, the bad place, there I think it's my fault that somehow I could have gotten a bigger investment portfolio if it weren't for the fact that investment portfolios are things you're born with, damn it. They don't define how good a person you are, how you're willing to listen to 2 hours of complaining about the office when she gets home from work, how you cook nutritious and damn delicious meals every night, how you just shrug every time she brought home some ridiculous expensive trinket, a vase from sub-Saharan Africa, an end table assembled entirely from plastic recycled from car batteries, gloves made of soy that have been chemically treated to change the proteinous fibers to feel like fur without actually being fur, because heaven forbid you actually be something that doesn't require 18 syllables and a bachelor's degree to explain, and... God, I'm going to have to think about my daughter and the investment portfolios she'll want someday. Ugh. It certainly doesn't help that the cuttlefish is smiling. I know it's not a smile. I try to tell myself that I'm imprinting human behavioral traits onto an animal, that personification of non-sentient creatures is just a means of obscuring the truth of their existence, which is a disservice to them even if it is meant to cast them in a positive light. Of course, my daughter doesn't see it that way as she tugs at a handful of my sensible red and purple plaid shirt and says, "Daddy, he's smiling. Look, he loves me." I kind of want to tell her how her mother used to smile at me even as she was checking out all those bigger and better investment portfolios, but that's the spiteful part of me. And the worst part is that I'm not even sure if to be anger at my ex-wife for cheating on me, anger at my ex-wife for leaving me, or anger at my daughter for making me think about it. So instead I say, he has a nice smile, honey, but he's much too big for our apartment. Rick thinks he's going to be helpful at that point, even though he still won't meet my eyes. He says, "Sir, we offer deferred payment on habitat design. Our designers have helped craft hundreds of perfectly livable and lively spaces for cuttlefish like this one that are unobtrusive and ergonomic, and there's a feng shui option for $40 extra up front." My daughter's still tugging on my shirt, saying, "I named him Milton, Daddy. His name's Milton, and he loves me, and you just gotta get him." Milton smiles at me. Rick sniffles, says, "They're very affectionate creatures." My daughter says, "Yes, they're very affectionate creatures. Daddy, affectionate creatures, Daddy." I'm sweating. I mean, of course I'm sweating. It's hot in pet stores. I think they do that to keep the animals docile, aside from drugging them and feeding them whatever shit it takes to make them grow to the size of Jaws in 2 weeks. And keeping them under halogen lights. Oh yes, halogen lights. I've heard what those do. They give you cancer and shit. It was in that journal, the one with the pictures. My daughter's tapping lightly on the glass, saying, "You love me, don't you, Milton?" "No, I don't," Milton replies. "What?" my daughter asks. "I don't love you," Milton says, still smiling, rocking back and forth slightly in his enormous tank. "I don't love you at all," he continues, "because you are a garbage person. I would poke out your eyeballs with a stick if I had opposable thumbs. I would sooner chew on piano wire than love you, and I don't have teeth." Rick looks nervous, glancing between the shocked look on my daughter's face and the tank where Milton is still smiling his cuttlefish smile. "They do that sometimes," Rick says. "You know, talk. It's all in what you feed them. I hear that what they say is also in all what you feed them, but..." My daughter bolts and runs from the store. I turn to Rick and feel a surge. I haven't felt a surge in a long time, not since before my daughter was born, maybe even before I married my ex. It's a hot feeling, a tingling, starting in my stomach and then spreading out, ending in my fingertips and my toes. Anyway, I lay into Rick. "What kind of a circus is this?" I ask, full of the righteous fury of the wronged. "Your wail just made my little girl cry. I ought to report you to your manager. I ought to report Milton to animal control. I ought to report this place to the Better Business Bureau. I am ferocious," I tell myself. "I am vicious. I am a Valkyrie swinging a fucking sword of truth. I am the customer, and the customer is always fucking right." Meanwhile, Rick is staring at me with those wide eyes that get wider with every sentence, and I'm sick of his stupid face, and I'm clearly better than him, so I grab that name tag of his directly off his chest and chuck it over the edge of Milton's tank, where it plops into the water and sinks down to land on Milton's enormous head. "There, what do you think of that?" I say. Rick's eyes get wider still for a second, and then they brim over with tears, and he's actually crying. "So you won't buy Milton," he says. "No," I reply, just flabbergasted enough to forget my righteous fury long enough to give him a sincere answer. Rick nods. "Good," he says. I couldn't part with him. He's my life partner, my buddy." I look between blubbering Rick and still smiling Milton and shake my head. "Yeah, okay," I say. "I'm going after my daughter." I turn to go, but I look back to see Rick put a hand on the tank, still crying, to hear Milton say, "Suck my balls, dickweed," and to see Rick nod. Then I'm out the door. My daughter is standing just outside the door, leaning against the wall crying, and I can't help but be reminded of the first time I met my ex-wife. My daughter has her same long, wavy brown hair, extremely narrow frame, unearthly skinniness despite eating the utter junk I feed her, and she cries the same way, with short sobs that send her hair shaking in waves which rattle the little purple dress she's wearing. But thankfully, unlike my ex, my daughter's not crying over some boy who's just dumped her and probably had an outstanding investment portfolio. No, she's crying over something easier, the loss of something she never really had, being let down over something minor, something I can explain. Finally, a chance to do some real parenting. Time to make the most of all those Parenting for Dummies textbooks that my ex gave to me and then never read herself. Before I can lay a consoling hand on her shoulder, Chapter 2, Physical Support isn't just a cliche, and tell her gently that sometimes things just don't go our way. Chapter 5, How to Tell Brats the World Hates Them Without DSS having to get involved. She looks up at me and says, "Daddy, I want a different pet." Okay, I reply, thinking that maybe she'll go for something smaller, cheaper, less intrusive, and then we can have our big father-daughter heart-to-heart. Daddy, she says, I want seagulls. A whole fucking flock of seagulls, as many as you can fucking find. When she smiles at me, it's Milton's smile, and I think, well, seagulls. I guess that's fine. At least when they shit all over me, it won't be anything too new. Thank you. It is now my great pleasure and honor to introduce the final reader of Word World. DeShara Suggs-Joe is a co-founder of Daughter's Tongue and a member of the Youth Speaks Collective. She is a 2016 Callaloo Fellow and has publications forthcoming from the Texas Review and Button Poetry. She's been published in the Oakland Review and Art Cult Zine. She has performed at the likes of Spotify, Yahoo, and Pinterest, but considers herself home inside a classroom, teaching creative writing to high school youth. Ladies and gentlemen, DeShara Suggs-Joe.
Thank you. I just want to thank all my mentors that I've had since I came here, and I also really want to thank 3 people who there's just no way I could have made it through this program without, which are Grace, Ella, and Tanya Foster. Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. So funny story, the person this poem is about just texted me, which is, why are you texting me? We're exes. Okay, anyway. He asked me why all my poems are sad. How do I explain darkness? It follows me even to our bed. So I stay up and envy the heaviness of his sleep. He wants to know why my poems weigh more than he can pick up. Why he can't save me. How do I tell him I envision all the ways life will break me? I don't turn on the news anymore. It's all blood. My Facebook a stream of gunshots, beatings, death. I try to bring the bodies back to life in my poems. Frustration comes. I can't figure out how to resurrect my kin or myself. My poems are funerals. The ways I have buried bits of myself, or sometimes my poems are holes in my torso. I'm exposed. And he wants me to stop carrying the grief with me, to cover my wounds, but I don't know how. Poems are the only thing that keep me alive, and he offers love. But I don't know what to do with that, to lean on something so fragile. My mixed friend calls me racist, and I thought she was asking, was I fed up with racism, tired of seeing my body painted white and praised, tired of ratchet only being cute on non-black people. And how about that? They skin the vernacular right off my tongue and call it sassy, call my box braids boxer braids, and make a new trend. And they keep the new trend, the cool words we make up, and leave the body. I'm not a refuge, but often I wonder where my blood comes from. I could use Ancestry.com, but my face would still be stranger in every African country. My tongue still American and boasting of a freedom untrue. Most days, that fact makes me want to rip my skin apart. What's the use of being black and American? They'll still call me African. They'll still deny my robbery and act like I should be happy. My bones belong here. Happy my passport blue, and I don't get the symbolism. And sometimes I wish my ears understood any language besides English, so I could ignore the way white people use nigga like an adjective, skin, decoration. Now I know you don't have to be hung to hang. You don't have to be foreign to feel like your blood ain't theirs. People tell me I look like this African country and they don't understand the depression. To know your face belongs in a place you'll never travel. And I can't claim African, so I call myself black. Most days I leave the American off because I don't want my culture synonymous with death. Don't want to admit that I'm envious that there are no stories about my kin. My lineage is a swirl of blood and bodies taken, auctioned, raped. The color of my skin is a reflection of saying no, and no one hearing the screams. The screams. The screams are still in my head like background music. I don't complain though. My password is still Navy without stamps, and there is no mixing of my tongue yet. I am American, and I guess that means something. So this next piece is, I'm actually taking creative nonfiction this semester, so this is a part of a longer piece that I wrote for creative nonfiction. Mask, 1, a covering of all of the face, worn as a disguise, or to amuse or terrify other people, and that definition is from Google. Do your Googles. In grad school in 2016, a white student writes nigger in his story. He hangs a body with his pen, thinks it's edgy. Like most white people who steal language, believe the skin, the bones, the blood. And I am not in class with him, but everyone tells me this tale. And I am shook that I once called my future babies Oreos. I assimilated to whiteness because I was a punk, because I had to get out of my hometown, because most of the black girls from my high school are still there with kids and no husbands and jobs they hate and drama that they let play off over Facebook. And we all laugh at the videos of so-and-so getting their ass beat on Facebook Live. And I cringe thinking about how that could have been me if I didn't choose to wipe my tongue. So I am no different. I thought too it would be easier to be named Lisa instead of DeShara. My mom perms my hair at 5, my curls problematic. She calls my hair nappy today. Says it's not cute when I wear my afro. Doesn't realize her brain has been washed too. But now I'm all pro-black, and my 2 non-black friends from home ask me if I am racist. They say they don't like what I post on social media. They want to play victim, devil's advocate. I tell them hell can be no hotter than living in someone else's body. I tell them I had to relearn how to love my skin, and I can't go back to who I was in those honor classes, the butt of the joke, court jester, the one holding on to whiteness like it is a blue-eyed savior. I'm gonna be able to clip this to my dress. Okay, I'm just gonna hold it because I don't have time. Okay. This last piece is in a collaboration with Blacklight, which is the exhibit at the Wattis. And the question was, how do you feel as a black person to be in institutions that are not black, that are majority white? What does that make you feel like? So this is a response to that. They'll claim your body when they think it's good enough. Have you show all your teeth in pictures but still introduce you with the wrong name. Want you on all their flyers, so you become a token for diversity. In class, someone will tell you not to put all your race poems in the front of your manuscript. How dare you think you're black, strong enough to carry a narrative? They'll skin you and wear your skin like a bodysuit tell you you belong now. You don't need all that attitude and pride and righteousness. Then they'll call you angry when you ask for your skin back, tell you how lucky you are, act like they made you, and then threaten your career. And I laugh because I think how great my black must be for them to want to erase it. So I don't participate with the white liberal ladies who shoved Hillary down my throat, told me she would be best for my bones, like either of you give a fuck about my bones. And there is not enough room in this poem to mention white men, so I'll just leave them in this verse. See, I don't get to choose, and I'm sick of playing nice so white feels like everywhere it go is home. Isn't that the problem? How they forget about the blood and I can't. So I want every poem I write to be this black, fixing my voice to praise and worship my own skin. I can't look to institutions to do it for me because they told me to be smart and meek and ambitious, and I became those things. But what they meant was, be quiet. Let us mold you the way we want. So I don't show up to readings anymore. Told them to take my name off the flyer. I will no longer be a scapegoat for an institution that doesn't value my bones. It's not about the recruitment, but the upkeep. Teachers who don't recycle their syllabus with the same dead white writers or look at my work with confusion. I want to loosen the noose they put around my neck and the debt they fasten around my ankles. I want to tell them this place did nothing for me, but it taught me that I could be brilliant and in this body, and they will still find a way to defame me. So I told them, so I became my own version of hallelujah and amen to my black being worth something I can shout for. I am not theirs. I won't let them bury me while there is breath still percolating my lungs and poems still on the edge of my tongue. Thank you.